Are Skaven the perfect models for Grimdark? I think so. Today I've got a very special video showing you how to paint the new Rat Ogors using Grimdark Compendium's Villainy Inks. So onto the recipe, and we're going to start off with acrylics and getting some base colours down. If you've watched any of my other Grimdark videos, this process will seem familiar to you. We're starting over a black primer and using AK grey green all over. You'll notice that this is quite a light colour, and the reason for this is that Villainy Inks will dull down and bring the brightness down on all of our base colours. So we need to start vibrant and bright, otherwise the finished model will just be a dark dingy mess, which, contrary to what some believe, does not make for a nice looking Grimdark model. After that it's magenta, and I'm going to hit the fleshy areas and the tail here. I'm using AK 3rd Gen paints through the airbrush with about a 2:1 ratio of paint to thinner, and I'm spraying at quite a high PSI, probably around 30, using a 0.3mm needle. You could absolutely use a brush to apply this paint if you don't want to airbrush too. With our pink laid down, we're going to use AK Vampiric Flesh through the airbrush again, and we're spraying this aiming at the centre of those pink fleshy areas. Because airbrushing tends to leave transparent layers, this will make a really nice pink fleshy tone, but you could also use stippling with a dry brush to create a similar effect, and it would be nice and mottled too. Next I'm going to work on the rest of the skin and fur, and to begin with I'm stippling some grey brown on any areas that you can see on the model which have sculpted fur. I'm not worried about being too accurate here, as long as we get the brown in so that we can layer it up with the next step, which is going to be a dry brush with deck tan just hitting those moulded fur sections. It's better to go lighter here and build up slowly with the dry brushing, rather than going heavy off the bat and ruining the previous steps. Skipping quickly through the rest of the base coats, I'm using dirty red for the cloth, grey brown for the leather, bronze for some of the metal, and silver for the rest of the metal, and these are all from AK Interactive. And now for the fun part, the Villainy Inks. There's 7 colours in total, but I'm going to be using these 5 in this video. First up, I think we can all appreciate how awesome these boxes and the bottles inside look. Very Grimdark indeed. These are enamel based washes, and like all enamels, they really need a proper good shake. One thing I found with these is that they're a little thicker than usual enamels, so shaking is extra important. I'm going to be starting with Carrying Crimson and working on those fleshy parts. So using the built-in pipette, I put some into a little mixing dish, and you can really see that these are a little thick, so I'm diluting them down with some white spirits. Byron from Artisopus gave a great tip to store these on the sides to prevent gunk from clogging up the pipettes. With that diluted, I sprayed it aiming at the fleshy bits, and then used a cotton bud to roll off any excess and leave some of the residue. And you can see it really adds to that horrible fleshy look on these parts. Next up, I wanted to try the classic Grimdark all over wash and reduction method, so I mixed up some of the Goon's Grime colour, again with some white spirits, and sprayed this all over the model. I probably could have applied this thicker, but it really just meant less reducing. It is important when you're reducing to roll a cotton bud rather than rub it across the model, and this does 2 things. 1, it helps to avoid rubbing any paint off, and 2, it reduces the amount of fibres that are left on the model, although you still might get a few. Once that's dried, we've got some nice tones going on in there, but we've lost some of the definition, so the ichor of the damned colour is going to come in useful here. I watered some down and washed it into the recesses. Enamels have a very low surface tension, so will naturally float into recesses using something called capillary action. It makes them super useful for filling recesses fast. One of the best things about enamels is that if you go overboard you can remove it. I'm not too worried about it on this model, as all the enamels will add to the grimy look overall. But if you were doing this black lining on a cleaner model, then it's a useful technique to have. I felt after one lot of black that we still didn't have enough definition, but that's not a problem, I just repeated the process. Now it's time to add some verdigris, so I used the Decay of Death colour, and I watered this down to more of a wash consistency, as I wanted this effect to be subtle. I applied it around any recesses and rivets on the metal parts of the model. One of the most fun things about these paints is that they really don't take a lot of accuracy to get a nice looking effect. I repeated this with the Sector Rust colour, but a little bit less diluted and only on the silver metals. Something to be aware of when using enamels is not to use your best brush. Enamels and white spirits don't do a great job of preserving your brush tips, so definitely don't use your finest brand new brushes when applying these. One final thing I wanted to do with the Villainy Inks was apply a bit more crimson around the edges of the fleshy areas to help define these more. Again, the capillary action helped the paint to flow into those edges and recesses to really make those fleshy areas stand out. Here's what it looks like when it's all dried. I'm really pleased with the Villainy Inks. The set has all the colours you could really want to paint in the Grimdark style. The pipettes are a bit annoying. I might transfer the paints to the standard wide neck enamel bottles you usually see grime come in and use my own pipettes. Other than that, I really like that they're a bit thicker so you can dilute them yourselves or apply thickly. The crimson is my favourite colour and I'm really pleased with how the fleshy areas have come out. Onto the glowy rock on his shoulder and back to acrylic paints. I start by painting this in white, and then the camera doesn't really pick this up very well, but I glaze some blue into the faces of the rock. On each flat face I try to roughly glaze the colour away from one side. When glazing, the idea is to use a very watered down acrylic paint and then to remove most of this from your brush on a paper towel before applying it in one direction on the model in very thin layers to build up the paint. When I had built up a nice gradient on each of the faces, I used Green Stuff World fluorescent green acrylic through the airbrush to filter over the whole of the rock and let some of the overspray hit the surrounding areas of the shoulder to emulate a glow effect. To finally sell the effect, I used AK fluorescent green enamel and applied it into the big cracks around the rock. Again, this is an enamel so it flowed easily into the rocks, and when it dries it really pops. The last thing was the base with some AK mud and base dip in Rivalcraft's Arid Earth and some liquid pigments, and we're done. What do you think? What do you think of the Villainy Inks? Do you think you'll try these? Thanks for watching everyone, see you next time, bye!